The state of Michigan is considering allowing local municipalities the right to decide if they want to establish their own rent control laws. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today. It's coming out of the state of Michigan. So Michigan is not known as being a place that's not friendly to landlords. It's actually kind of the opposite. They're a pretty landlord-friendly place. You know, obviously they're located in the Midwest. The Midwest is known as having much less restrictive laws when it comes to who you can evict, how much you can charge for rent, and all the regulations, etc. But you know what? Someone is proposing a rule that would change state law and allow local municipalities to make up their own decision when it comes to rent control. Now, this is a bad idea. Okay, I've talked about all of the failings of rent control before, but it seems like no matter how many times that people talk about it, no one seems to ever read into, does it actually work? And the answer is no. Okay, they're comparing themselves to other places that have rent control, but they also happen to be some of the most expensive places to live in the entire country. Now, are they expensive to live in solely because of rent control? No, but it is exacerbating a problem that is caused by a shortage of housing. Okay, so the real solution, as I've mentioned many times before, is we have to either increase the supply of housing or decrease the demand for housing. That's the way that you bring prices down. And if a law that you pass, a rule or a regulation that you pass with the hopes of making housing more affordable, if it does neither of those two things, well, guess what? It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna make any difference for the people who actually need the housing, okay? As I've mentioned also in other rent control related videos, the only people who benefit under rent control are the ones who live in that housing right now and are able to lock in that low rent. Future generations of people, they don't benefit because they're unable to find rent control housing because the other people are still in housing that they should have moved out of a long time ago. Okay? Anyway, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So for those of you who know the state of Michigan, invest there, etc., do you think that this sort of law will pass? Do you think this will be popular? I know that places like Detroit are much more anti-landlord, obviously, because they have so many landlords and there's such a high percentage of renters living within the city. But I don't know about the rest of the state. The rest of the state might be a very, anti this sort of legislation place. Okay, they might say, hey, you know what, this tramples all over all of our property rights. We got to make sure this sort of thing doesn't pass. Anyway, let me get into this article. We'll get into the details of exactly what they're trying to pass up there and why they're trying to pass it. This article is coming from wwmt.com, and it says, Michigan bill would cap soaring rents, aligning with 6 other states and DC. I always find it funny when they say, oh, we're going to cap rents. It's kind of like a very misleading statement. We're going to cap rents so that they don't get too high. That's rent control. Okay, rent control, artificial government price control. Okay, and it's misleading in that a lot of people, they don't understand that rent control and capping rents or rent stabilization or whatever terminology that they're using, it's the same exact thing. It has the same exact effects, and it doesn't matter what name you call it by, it is going to hurt not just landlords but tenants as well. So anyway, let's see what the article says. According to the city of Kalamazoo, rental rates have gone up 45% since the pandemic. As a result, people are spending a good chunk of their paycheck just to keep the place they live. There's a bill going through the Michigan legislature now that could help. The bill essentially aims to put Michigan on the map with 6 other states that have rent control, including California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Minnesota, and Oregon, plus the District of Columbia. Yeah, look at that. And, the list of states there, California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Minnesota, and Oregon. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of states you want to be stuck with. States where the cost of housing is extremely high. Now, as far as I know right now, because of its location in the Rust Belt and in the Midwest interior of the country, Michigan is relatively affordable. I'm not saying that all parts of Michigan are cheap or anything, right? But Michigan is relatively affordable compared to other places in the country. Now, do you want it to be where housing costs are just as high as they are in places like New York or California? I wouldn't. But, that's exactly what's going to happen if we start imposing these style of laws, the type of laws that they have in those states. So one of the things they mentioned here was rental rates have gone up 45% in the city of Kalamazoo since the pandemic. Hey, you know what? It's 2024 now, right? And before the pandemic was 2019. So it's been 5 years. So rental rates have gone up 45% in 5 years. Is that outrageous? Not really, especially when you consider the fact that we've had sky high inflation, okay? Everyone, landlords, tenants alike, is suffering through the effects of inflation. Everything costs more now. And that's because they were printing money like crazy so they could pass out those stupid stimulus checks and all the social welfare, expanded unemployment benefits, etc. Okay? So they were printing money like crazy. And then they were surprised when inflation went through the roof. And so what they're saying here is that, we don't think that the rental rates should have gone up 45%. And I'm sitting here saying that, well, all landlords' expenses went up. All of our expenses went up. All of them. Every single expense I have has gone up since the time before the pandemic in the last 5 years. Okay, I'm talking about my insurance costs, I'm talking about my utilities costs, I'm talking about my maintenance costs, how much I have to pay my property manager has gone up, I'm talking about my property taxes have gone up. Every single thing. Okay, the mortgage payment went up on several of my properties because guess what? Interest rates increased. You see the problem when you say that, the rents have gone up too much for the tenants. Well, that doesn't take into consideration the increased costs that landlords are facing, which is why we had to raise the rents, why the tenants have to pay more, because we have to pay more as well. Ridiculous. House Bill 4947 simply repeals to prohibition or preemption on local municipalities establishing rent stabilization policies. This would allow municipalities to decide for themselves if there is some sort of local ordinance that might work in their municipality to stabilize rent prices, said Reingans. If the bill becomes law, it would mean that it would be illegal for your landlord to increase your rent past a certain cap. Yep, rent control right there, okay? You wouldn't be allowed to increase your rent beyond a certain cap. And who decides what that cap is going to be, okay? And how do they know how much your expenses are as an individual, okay? Like my expenses could be much higher because I have a mortgage on my properties versus a property owner across the street who has an identical home to mine, right? That has owned their home free and clear for the last 10 years. And that's another thing, right? I could have a mortgage with a 4% interest rate while the property owner over on the other side of town has a mortgage with a 7% interest rate. So our payments are vastly different. Not only that, but I paid $100,000 for my house. He paid $150,000. So not only did I pay less, have a lower interest rate, and maybe I pay less for insurance and property taxes, etc. as well. But you know what? He has to pay all of his expenses, and maybe he pays a property manager and I self-manage. So yeah, it makes a lot more sense. No, he can't charge the $1,200 a month that I can charge for mine and still make a profit. He has to charge $1,500 a month in order to make a profit. It's 100% understandable, but you can't explain this stuff to tenants who'll be like, oh, well, you guys have identical properties, so therefore your expenses are going to be the exact same. No, it doesn't work that way. This is reality, okay? If you don't like it, nobody's forcing you to rent anywhere from anyone. Nobody's forcing you to live anywhere. You can move to somewhere you can afford. If that means downsizing, if that means moving to a different city or a different state, so be it. But you know what? Forcing landlords to charge what you think, in your very biased opinion, is a fair rent, That is a failing formula that will lead to disrepair of properties, lack of development, shortage of housing, especially affordable housing for those who need it, okay? And these are the issues that I keep bringing up over and over and over again. So look out. If you're in Michigan, you're a voter, make sure you tell your elected officials exactly what you think of this garbage, okay? Do not let this sort of thing pass. Okay, this should be a free market, not a government-controlled market where the tenant has more power over your property than you do. So, yeah, I'll put a link to this article in the description down below. Let me know what you think of this whole situation.